The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal spires of New Geneva, humanity's greatest colony world. Children laughed as they ran through the parks, their voices echoing off buildings that reached toward the sky like fingers of hope. For 3,000 years, this sound had been the heartbeat of human civilization. Peace was not just a word anymore. It was a way of life. Captain Lisa Martinez stood on the bridge of the UHS Discovery, watching the planet grow smaller through the view screen. Her ship was heading to the outer rim, where ancient ruins waited to tell their stories. The crew moved with the easy confidence of people who had never known real danger. Space was vast and full of wonders, not threats. "Captain, we're receiving the morning reports from Earth," said Commander Ryan Clark, her second in command. He was a tall man with kind eyes who had joined the fleet to see the stars, not to fight wars. His tactical station hadn't been used for combat in over a decade. Most days he helped navigate asteroid fields and coordinated with alien trading ships. "What's the news from home?" Lisa asked, settling into her command chair. The leather was worn and comfortable like everything else on the Discovery. Human ships were built for exploration, not battle. They carried scientists, not soldiers. "Chancellor Andrew Burke is meeting with the Galactic Council next week," Ryan replied. "Something about expanding the cultural exchange programs. The Zilani want to study our music, and we want to learn about their underwater cities," Lisa smiled. This was the galaxy she knew. Different species working together, sharing knowledge, building friendships that spanned the stars. Earth was the center of a web of peaceful relationships that stretched across thousands of light years. Human colonies traded with alien worlds. Human children grew up learning alien languages. Human explorers mapped new worlds alongside creatures that looked nothing like them but shared the same curiosity about the universe. Dr. Patricia Stone entered the bridge carrying a tablet full of research data. She was the ship's chief scientist, a woman who had spent her life studying dead civilizations. Her work helped everyone understand how species could rise and fall, how peace could be built and maintained. "Lisa, we're approaching the Kepler ruins," Patricia said. "The scans show structures that are at least 50,000 years old. This could be the find of the century." "Any signs of current activity?" Lisa asked. It was standard procedure. The galaxy was big, and sometimes different species discovered the same places at the same time. Usually they shared the site and learned from each other. "Nothing on sensors," Ryan reported. "The system is clean. Just us and the ghosts of whoever built those cities." The Discovery moved deeper into the Kepler system, past dead planets and cold moons. The ruins were on the fourth planet, massive stone structures that had once housed a civilization whose name was lost to time. Lisa felt the familiar excitement of discovery. This was what humans did best. They found things, learned from them, and shared that knowledge with everyone. 3 days later, the first colony world burned. The attack came without warning. Ships appeared out of nowhere, their designs unlike anything in the galactic databases. They were angular and aggressive, built for war in a way that human eyes hadn't seen for millennia. The colonists of Harmony Ridge had no defense against such weapons. Their orbital stations were destroyed in minutes. Their cities were bombed from space. But the attackers didn't want to kill everyone. They wanted something specific. Admiral Kevin Hayes sat in his office on Luna Base, staring at reports that made no sense. 12 colony worlds had been hit simultaneously. The attacks were precise, surgical. Military targets were destroyed, but civilian areas were mostly spared. The pattern was clear and terrifying. "They took the children," he said to his aide, Lieutenant Colonel Susan Carter. "Every single child between the ages of 5 and 15. Over 50,000 of them." Susan felt the blood drain from her face. She had 2 children of her own back on Earth, safe in their schools, playing with their friends. The thought of them being taken by aliens made her hands shake. "Sir, who would do such a thing?" she asked. "The Galactic Council has laws against this. Every civilized species signed the Protection Accords." The attackers identified themselves as the Vorthek Empire. Kevin replied, his voice hard. We've never heard of them before. They must have been hiding in deep space, watching us planning this. The Vorthak had left behind a message. It was broadcast on every frequency in perfect human language. The voice was mechanical, emotionless, like a computer reading from a script. We have taken your young for study. Human adaptability exceeds all other species by factors we do not understand. Your children will help us learn why your species thrives where others fail. Do not attempt rescue. Do not attempt negotiation. Their purpose now serves the advancement of knowledge. On Earth, Chancellor Andrew Burke stood before the Global Assembly, his face pale but his voice steady. Behind him, holographic displays showed the faces of the missing children. Thousands of them, smiling in school photos, playing in parks, hugging their parents goodbye for what might be the last time. For 3,000 years we have lived in peace, he said. We have explored the galaxy with open hands and open hearts. We have made friends with species that once seemed impossible to understand. We have built a civilization based on cooperation, learning, and mutual respect. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made everyone in. The chamber leaned forward. That peace has been broken. Not by us, but by creatures who see our children as laboratory specimens. They have mistaken our kindness for weakness. They have mistaken our peace for helplessness. Across human space, the reaction was immediate and terrifying. On New Geneva, parents clutched their remaining children closer. On the industrial worlds, factories stopped producing trade goods and started retooling for purposes that had been forgotten for centuries. On the agricultural planets, farmers looked up at the stars and saw not wonders but threats. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives from 200 species gathered in the Great Hall on the neutral world of Sanctuary. The Zelani delegate, Prime Counselor Veltar, spoke for the assembly. We understand humanity's anger, the amphibious creature said through its translator. But we must respond with wisdom, not rage. The Vorthak Empire is unknown to us, but violence will only breed more violence. We must try diplomacy first. Ambassador Charles Green represented humanity at the council. He was a career diplomat, a man who had spent his life building bridges between species. Now he stood before his alien colleagues and felt something he had never experienced before. He felt alone. My friends, he said, using a term that suddenly felt hollow, they have taken our children. Not our soldiers, not our leaders, but our children. In human culture there is no greater crime. We ask for your help in bringing them home. The Council voted to impose economic sanctions on the Vorthak Empire once they could be located. They voted to send a strongly worded diplomatic protest. They voted to form a committee to study the situation. They did not vote to help rescue the children. Back on Luna Base, Admiral Hayes watched the Council proceedings with growing disbelief. Susan Carter stood beside him, her own children now under armed guard like all human children across the galaxy. Sir, she said quietly, they're not going to help us, are they? Kevin looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her step back. It was something that hadn't been seen in human eyes for 3,000 years. No, he said, they're not. But that's all right, Susan. We don't need their help. We never did. He turned to his communications officer. Send a message to Earth. Tell Chancellor Burke that the fleet is ready to receive new orders. Tell him that Admiral Hayes requests permission to activate the Terra protocols. Susan felt a chill run down her spine. The Terra protocols were theoretical documents, contingency plans written by paranoid military planners centuries ago. They had never been used because they had never been needed. They outlined what humanity would do if the galaxy ever turned against them. Now they were about to find out if 3,000 years of peace had made humanity soft, or if it had simply given them time to grow strong in ways their enemies could never imagine. The age of human innocence was over. The age of human wrath was about to begin. The message went out from Earth at exactly noon Greenwich time. Every human world, every colony, every station in deep space received the same transmission. Chancellor Burke's face appeared on screens across the galaxy, his voice carrying an authority that humanity hadn't heard in 3,000 years. Citizens of the Human Federation, he began, as of this moment I am declaring a state of total war. The Terra protocols are now active. Every human being, regardless of age or occupation, is now part of our war effort. We will bring our children home. We will make those responsible pay, and we will ensure this never happens again. On the industrial world of New Pittsburgh, Director Tony Mitchell stood in the main factory control room watching as massive machines that had built farming equipment for centuries began retooling themselves. The computers had new programs now, programs that had been stored in secure files for 3,000 years, programs that knew how to build weapons of war. How long until the first units roll off the line? He asked his chief engineer, a woman named Carol Reed, who had spent her life building machines that helped people. 72 hours, Carol replied, her voice tight. The automated systems are already adapting the assembly protocols. We'll be producing military-grade plasma rifles by the end of the week. Tony nodded. His own grandson had been on Harmony Ridge when the attack came. 8 years old, bright as a star, taken by creatures who saw him as a test subject. The thought made his hands clench into fists. Double the shifts, he said. I want every factory on this world working around the clock. Sleep when the children come home. On Luna Base, Admiral Hayes watched as the greatest military mobilization in human history began to unfold. Ships that had been mothballed for centuries were being pulled from storage. Civilian vessels were being converted into warships. Young people who had never imagined holding a weapon were lining up at recruitment centers. Lieutenant Colonel Susan Carter coordinated the fleet buildup from her command center. The screens around her showed hundreds of ships moving through space, all converging on staging areas throughout human territory. Most of them were exploration vessels and cargo haulers, but the engineers were working miracles. Admiral, she reported. The Zaz Vengeance reports full combat readiness. Captain Ben Parker says his crew completed weapons training ahead of schedule. Hayes nodded grimly. Ben Parker had been a cargo hauler captain 3 days ago. His ship had carried grain and medical supplies between colonies. Now it mounted enough firepower to level a city, and Ben had learned to use it with the desperate efficiency of a man whose daughter was among the missing. What about our intelligence on the Vorthek? Hayes asked. Dr. Jonathan Lee entered the command center carrying a tablet full of data. He was Earth's leading expert on alien biology, a man who had spent his career studying how different species evolved and adapted. Now he was studying how to kill them. We've analyzed the technology they left behind at the attack sites, he said. Their weapons are advanced, but they follow predictable patterns. Their ships are heavily armored, but not particularly fast. Most importantly, they seem to rely on rigid tactical doctrines. He called up a holographic display showing Vorthek ship designs. They were angular and efficient, built by a species that valued order and precision above all else. They're not used to fighting humans, Dr. Lee continued. Every other species they've encountered follows logical, predictable patterns. We don't. Dr. Maria Santos, the team's geneticist, stepped forward with her own report. She had been studying the biological samples left behind by the attackers. They're silicon-based life forms, she said. Their physiology is completely different from ours. They're stronger than humans, but they're also much more fragile. Their bodies can't adapt to changing conditions the way ours can. Can we use that against them? Susan asked. Maria smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. I'm working on it. Give me a few weeks, and I'll have weapons that will make them wish they'd never heard of humanity. Across human space, the transformation was happening everywhere. On the colony world of New Boston, former teacher Helen Brooks found herself training civilian volunteers in basic combat tactics. Her students included farmers, artists, engineers, and shop owners. None of them had ever held a weapon before last week. Now they moved through training exercises with grim determination. Remember, she told them, the Vorthek think like machines. They follow plans and procedures. When those plans don't work, they get confused. That's when we hit them. One of her students was Jacob Thompson, barely 18 years old. His sister Amy had been taken from their home world of Green Valley. She was only 7, a bright little girl who loved to draw pictures of spaceships and alien worlds. Jacob had volunteered the day the news came through. "Ma'am," he said during a break in training, "when do we ship out? When do we go get them?" Helen looked at the boy and saw the same expression on his face that she was seeing everywhere. It was determination mixed with something darker, something that made her worry about what humanity was becoming. "Soon," she told him. "But remember, Jacob, we're not just going to rescue the children. We're going to make sure this never happens again." On Earth, the Galactic Council's ambassador tried to schedule an emergency meeting with Chancellor Burke, the alien diplomat. A tall insect-like creature called a Nexari had always been friendly with humans. Now he seemed nervous. "Chancellor," the ambassador said through his translator, "the Council is concerned about your military buildup. Many species are frightened by the size of your fleet. Perhaps we should consider a more measured response." Burke looked at the alien with eyes that had gone cold. "Ambassador, 50,000 human children are being held by creatures who see them as laboratory animals. There will be no measured response, there will be no negotiation, there will be justice." "But the economic disruption," the ambassador protested. "The threat to galactic stability. Surely you understand that war will hurt everyone." "Then help us end it quickly," Burke replied. "Give us the location of the Vorthak homeworld. Give us intelligence on their fleet strength. Help us bring our children home, and there won't need to be a long war." The ambassador's compound eyes flickered nervously. "The Council cannot authorize military action based on the crimes of one unknown species. We must follow proper procedures." Burke stood up slowly. "Then get out of my office. And tell your Council that humanity remembers its friends and its enemies." In deep space, Captain Lisa Martinez commanded a fleet of converted exploration ships. The UHS Discovery had been transformed from a peaceful research vessel into a weapon of war. Her bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, their earlier laughter replaced by grim purpose. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Karen White from the weapons station, "we're detecting Vorthak energy signatures in the next system. It looks like a patrol fleet." Lisa felt her heart rate increase. This would be their first real test. For 3,000 years, human naval tactics had been theoretical exercises. Now they were about to learn if their new weapons and training could stand up against a real enemy. "All ships, battle stations," she ordered. "Remember your training. The Vorthak expect us to fight like the other species they've conquered. They expect us to follow their rules. Show them what human creativity looks like." The fleet moved forward. 50 ships against an unknown enemy. Behind them, hundreds more fleets were forming throughout human space. Millions of volunteers were learning to fight. Factories were producing weapons at a rate that amazed even their builders, but the most important change was happening in the hearts and minds of ordinary humans. People who had spent their lives building, creating, and exploring were learning to destroy. Parents who had raised their children to be kind and peaceful were teaching them to be warriors. On the research station orbiting Jupiter, Dr. Patricia Stone worked on projects that would have horrified her just weeks ago. Her team was developing weapons specifically designed to target alien physiology. They were creating viruses that would affect only non-human biology. They were designing bombs that would turn entire worlds uninhabitable. "Doctor," her assistant asked quietly, "are you sure about this? These weapons could kill billions of innocent aliens." Patricia looked up from her work, her eyes haunted but determined. "They took our children," she said simply. "They opened this door. Now they have to live with what comes through it." The transformation of humanity was complete. 3,000 years of peace had not made them soft. It had given them time to grow, to learn, to become something more than they had ever been before. Now that strength would be focused on a single purpose. The galaxy was about to learn why threatening human children was the worst mistake the Vorthak Empire had ever made. 6 months after the children were taken, The largest war fleet in human history launched from Earth. 500 ships moved through space like a school of deadly fish, their hulls gleaming with new armor and bristling with weapons that had never been tested in real combat. Admiral Susan Carter stood on the bridge of the flagship UHS Retribution, watching her fleet spread out across the starfield. "All ships report ready for jump," announced Captain Alex Rodriguez from his position at the tactical station. He had been given command of the Special Operations Division, the ships that would go ahead and scout for the enemy. His own daughter had been taken from New Geneva, and the rage in his eyes never went away. "Begin the hunt," Susan ordered. "Find our children." The fleet disappeared into hyperspace, leaving Earth behind for the first time in millennia with the specific purpose of making war. Every ship carried volunteers who had given up their peaceful lives to become soldiers. Every captain had personal reasons for being there. Every weapon had been built by the hands of parents who worked day and night to bring their children home. On the stealth ship UHS Shadow, Captain Rodriguez led his special team through their final briefings. His squad included Sergeant Linda Davis, whose 8-year-old daughter Sarah had been taken from the farming colony of Green Hills. Linda had been a colonial security officer, the kind who helped lost tourists and broke up bar fights. Now she carried weapons designed to kill aliens and had learned to use them with cold precision. "Remember," Rodriguez told his team, "we're not just gathering intelligence. We're looking for any sign of the children. Every piece of information we find brings us closer to bringing them home." Corporal Matt Johnson nodded from his position at the communications station. His nephew Billy had been on Harmony Ridge when the attack came. Billy was only 6 years old, a little boy who loved to build things with blocks and ask endless questions about how spaceships worked. The thought of him in alien hands made Matt's jaw clench with anger. The Shadow moved ahead of the main fleet, its stealth systems hiding it from enemy sensors. They were heading toward the last known position of Vorthok ships, following a trail that was already growing cold. But humans had learned patience during their 3,000 years of peace. Now they would use that patience to hunt their enemies across the galaxy. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council was discovering that their attempt to control humanity through sanctions was having the opposite effect. Species that had traded with humans for centuries suddenly found their borders closed. Human colonies that had welcomed alien visitors now turned them away at gunpoint. The economic disruption spread across civilized space like a plague. Prime Counselor Veltar of the Zelani tried to organize a response but found that many species were too frightened to act. The humans had always been seen as peaceful explorers, the friendly neighbors who brought gifts and shared knowledge. Now they had revealed weapons and capabilities that no one had suspected. "How did we not know?" asked the Kefamor delegate, a proud warrior whose own species had fought countless battles across the stars. "How did the humans hide such military strength?" "They didn't hide it," replied Ambassador Charles Green, humanity's representative to the Council. "They simply never needed to use it before. You wanted to study human nature? Congratulations. You're about to get a very detailed lesson." Charles had changed during the months since the children were taken. The diplomat who had spent his career building bridges between species now stood before the Council like an avenging angel. Behind him, holographic displays showed the growing human fleet and the industrial might that was feeding it. "The Vorthok wanted to understand human adaptability," he continued. "They're about to learn that our greatest adaptation is our ability to become whatever we need to be. Right now, we need to be the thing that destroys those who harm our children." The first major battle came at the Kepler system, where Captain Lisa Martinez's task force encountered a Vorthok patrol fleet. The aliens had been investigating the same ancient ruins that the Discovery had been studying when the war began. Now the peaceful archaeological site became a battlefield. "Enemy ships detected," reported Lieutenant Karen White from her weapons station. 6 heavy cruisers and 12 escort vessels. "They're moving to intercept." Lisa looked at the tactical display and felt a cold calm settle over her. This was what all the training had been for. This was the moment when humanity would find out if their new weapons and tactics could match their rage. All ships attack Pattern Delta, she ordered. Show them what humans learned while they were hiding in the dark. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Vortex ships moved in perfect formation, following tactical doctrine that had served them well against dozens of other species. Their weapons were powerful and their armor was thick. They expected the humans to meet them head-on in a traditional space battle. Instead, the human ships scattered like startled birds, only to regroup in patterns that seemed random but were carefully planned. They struck from unexpected angles, using maneuvers that broke every rule of space combat. When the Vorthak adapted to one tactic, the humans switched to another. Captain Roy Adams commanded the battlecruiser UHS Justice, a converted mining ship that now carried enough firepower to crack a moon. His crew had been asteroid miners 6 months ago. Now they moved through space like they had been born to it, using the same skills that had once extracted precious metals to tear apart enemy ships. Target their engine sections, Adams ordered his weapons officer. Don't try to destroy them outright. Cripple them and leave them floating. I want survivors to question. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, the Vorthak patrol fleet was scattered wreckage floating in the darkness. Only one enemy ship remained intact, its crew surrendering when they realized they were completely outmatched. Lieutenant Commander Diane Foster led the boarding party that captured the surviving Vorthak vessel. She had been a xenobiologist before the war, someone who studied alien life forms with scientific curiosity. Now she studied them with the eye of a predator looking for weaknesses. The Vorthak prisoners were silicon-based creatures that looked like walking crystal formations. They communicated through harmonic vibrations and seemed genuinely confused by human tactics. Their captain, a being called Shard of Stars, agreed to be questioned through a universal translator. "Why do you fight with such chaos?" the alien asked. "Your tactics violate every principle of civilized warfare." "How do your commanders maintain control?" Diane smiled coldly. "That's the thing about humans. We don't need someone to tell us how to think. We figure it out as we go." The interrogation revealed crucial information. The children were being held at a research facility in the Vorthak home system, a place called the Core of Knowledge. The facility was protected by the Empire's entire home fleet, hundreds of ships arranged in defensive positions that had never been breached. But more importantly, the prisoner revealed what was being done to the children. The Vorthak scientists were conducting neurological experiments, trying to understand how human brains could adapt and improvise so quickly. They were mapping neural pathways and testing responses to various stimuli. Some children had been subjected to memory modification procedures. The news spread through the human fleet like wildfire. Admiral Carter received Diane's report while her ships were regrouping after the battle. The bridge of the Retribution went silent as she read the details of what their children were enduring. "Transmit this information to all ships," she ordered. "And send a copy to Earth. Let every human in the galaxy know what we're fighting for." The response was immediate and terrifying. Across human space, the last restraints of civilization began to fall away. Factories that had been producing conventional weapons switched to designing instruments of mass destruction. Scientists who had spent their lives healing began creating viruses designed to kill. The transformation that had begun with the Terra protocols was now complete. Captain Ben Parker received the transmission while his ship was patrolling the outer rim. He had been a peaceful cargo hauler before the war, a man who had never hurt anyone in his life. His daughter Emma had been taken from their home on New Geneva. She was 9 years old and loved to paint pictures of flowers. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving orders from Fleet Command. All ships are to converge on the Vorthak home system. Admiral Carter is authorizing the use of planet-killer weapons." Ben looked at the message and felt something cold settle in his chest. For 3,000 years, humanity had sworn never to build weapons that could destroy entire worlds. That oath was about to be broken. "Signal the fleet," he said quietly. "Tell them the UHS Vengeance is ready to show the Vorthak what happens when you hurt human children." Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out on hundreds of ships. The hunt was no longer about rescue, it had become about justice. And justice, as the Vorthic Empire was about to learn, was something that humans understood very well indeed. 2 years into the war, humanity had become something the galaxy had never seen before. The gentle explorers who once brought gifts and friendship to alien worlds now brought death and destruction. Admiral Susan Carter's fleet had grown to over 5,000 ships, each one carrying weapons that could crack planets and crews that had forgotten what mercy meant. General Frank Miller stood on the command deck of the assault ship, Hammer, watching the Vorthak colony world of Stone Garden burn below. His ground forces had taken the planet in 6 hours, moving through the alien cities like a force of nature. The Vorthak defenders had fought bravely, but they had never faced anything like human soldiers who had nothing left to lose. "Sir, the last enemy stronghold has fallen," reported Colonel Jennifer Price, his tactical commander. She had been a kindergarten teacher before the war, someone who spent her days helping 5-year-olds learn to read. Now she planned military operations with the cold precision of a machine. Her own daughter had been among the first children. "Taken? Any intelligence on the research facilities?" Frank asked. His voice was rough from breathing the smoke of burning alien cities. This was the 17th Vorthak world his forces had conquered, and each victory brought them closer to finding the children. "We found data cores that mention the Core of Knowledge facility," Jennifer replied. "It's confirmed to be in the Vorthak home system, but the location is heavily protected. They're using the children as a shield, sir. They know we're coming." Frank nodded grimly. The Vorthak had learned to fear human ground forces after the first few invasions. Human soldiers didn't follow the standard rules of warfare. They used tactics that seemed insane until they worked. They fought with a desperation that alien minds couldn't understand on Earth. President Burke stood in the Situation Room deep beneath the capital city. The gentle chancellor who had once promoted peace and understanding was gone, replaced by a war leader who ruled humanity with absolute authority. Around him, screens showed the progress of the war across dozens of star systems. "Mr. President," said Dr. Jonathan Lee, "the biological weapons program is ready for deployment. We've created viruses that target Vorthak physiology specifically. One deployment could eliminate their entire species within months." Burke looked at the scientist who had once studied alien life to help it flourish, who now studied it to find ways to make it extinct. Dr. Lee's team had worked around the clock. For 2 years, driven by images of human children in alien laboratories. "What about Dr. Santos's neural enhancement project?" Burke asked. Dr. Maria Santos stepped forward with her report. She had been developing ways to enhance human soldiers using technology reverse-engineered from captured Vorthak equipment. The irony was not lost on anyone that they were using alien science to make better weapons against aliens. "The first enhanced units are ready for deployment," she said. "Increased reaction speed, improved coordination, enhanced problem-solving abilities. They're everything the Vorthak wanted to understand about human adaptability, but better." Burke studied the reports with eyes that had grown cold during the Long War. The gentle leader who had once worried about diplomatic consequences now made decisions that would have horrified his younger self. "Deploy both programs," he ordered. "It's time to end this." Across human space, the industrial machine that had once built wonders now built instruments of destruction. On New Pittsburgh, director Tony Mitchell watched as his factories produced weapons that could sterilize entire star systems. His workers, many of them parents whose children were still missing, labored with a dedication that bordered on madness. "How many more planet killers can we build?" he asked his chief engineer. "As many as you want," Carol Reed replied. "The automated systems are working perfectly. We could build enough weapons to destroy every world in Vorthak space if needed." Tony looked out at the factory floor where machines worked day and night. His grandson was still missing, along with 50,000 other children. Every weapon that rolled off the production line brought them closer to getting those children back. Meanwhile, The Galactic Council was collapsing under the weight of humanity's transformation. Species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years now cowered behind their borders, afraid to attract human attention. The Zilani homeworld had fallen to human forces in a single day when they refused to provide intelligence about Vorthic movements. Prime Counselor Veltar broadcast his species' surrender from underwater cities that were now occupied by human Marines. The amphibious leader, who had once called for measured diplomatic responses, now begged for mercy from creatures he no longer recognized. "We underestimated your species' capacity for focused rage," he said in the message that would become humanity's unofficial motto. "We thought your peace made you weak. We were wrong. Please spare our civilians. They did nothing to harm your children." Admiral Peter Collins, who commanded the occupation fleet, granted the request. But the message was clear to every species in the galaxy. Humanity would show mercy to those who helped them, and total destruction to those who stood in their way. In deep space, Captain Alex Rodriguez's Special Operations Team finally located the primary research facility. The UHS Shadow had spent months following intelligence leads and intercepting Vorthic communications. Now they floated in the darkness. Outside the core of knowledge, a massive station hidden in an asteroid field in the Vorthak home system. "The facility is larger than we thought," reported Sergeant Linda Davis, studying the scanner readings. "It's not just a research station, it's a city. They've got hundreds of thousands of their own people living there, along with the human children." Rodriguez felt his jaw clench as he studied the tactical displays. His daughter was somewhere inside that station, along with 30,000 other human children who had survived the experiments. Intelligence suggested that 20,000 others had not been so lucky. "Any way to infiltrate without triggering their defenses?" he asked. Corporal Matt Johnson looked up from his communications station with a grim expression. "Sir, I've been monitoring their internal communications. The children aren't just being studied anymore. They're being used as test subjects for something called the Adaptation Project. The Vorthak are trying to modify their own soldiers using human neural patterns." The bridge of the Shadow went silent. Every person there had lost family to the Vorthak, but the idea that the aliens were trying to steal human adaptability and use it for their own purposes was beyond anything they had imagined. "Signal Admiral Carter," Rodriguez ordered. "Tell her we've found the target, and tell her to bring everything we've got." Back on the Retribution, Admiral Carter received the report while coordinating the largest military operation in human history. Every ship in the human fleet was converging on the Vorthak home system. Millions of soldiers, thousands of ships, and weapons that could crack worlds were all moving toward a single target. "Ma'am," reported her communications officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the Vorthak Emperor himself. He wants to negotiate." Carter looked at the message request with contempt. Emperor Vorthak had ruled the Vorthak Empire for over a century, expanding their territory and subjugating dozens of species. Now he wanted to talk because humanity was at his doorstep. "Put him through," she said. The holographic display showed a massive crystalline being, its faceted surface reflecting the lights of his command center. When he spoke, his voice was like the sound of breaking glass. "Admiral Carter," he said through the translator, "I propose an exchange. We will return your surviving children if you withdraw your forces and end this war." Carter stared at the alien emperor with eyes that had seen too much death. "Your Majesty," she said, her voice deadly calm, "you have 72 hours to surrender unconditionally and return every single child. If you refuse, we will demonstrate why threatening human children was the worst mistake your species ever made. You cannot threaten an entire civilization over the actions of a few scientists," the Emperor protested. "We are an ancient and proud people. We will not bow to barbarians who know nothing of civilized warfare." Carter smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Your Majesty, in 72 hours you're going to learn that there is nothing civilized about what humans do to protect their young. We gave you a chance to return them peacefully. You chose to conduct experiments instead. Now you'll discover what happens when you mistake human kindness for weakness." She cut the transmission and turned to her fleet commanders. Around her, the greatest military force humanity had ever assembled prepared for the final battle. The war that had begun with the theft of children was about to end with the destruction of an empire. The Vorthak had wanted to study human nature. In 72 hours, they would get their final lesson. The surrender message came with only 23 minutes left on the deadline. Emperor Vorthak's image appeared on screens across the human fleet, his crystalline form cracked and dulled with defeat. Behind him, the massive space station called. The core of knowledge was already being evacuated. "Admiral Carter," the Emperor said, his voice like breaking glass, "the Vorthak Empire surrenders unconditionally. We will return all surviving human children immediately. Please spare our civilians. They did nothing wrong." Admiral Susan Carter stood on the bridge of the UHS Retribution, surrounded by officers who had forgotten what peace looked like. Around her, 5,000 warships held their fire, weapons that could destroy planets ready to unleash hell if the Emperor tried to deceive them. "Your Majesty," she replied coldly, "you have 1 hour to transfer every human child to our medical ships. Any attempt at deception will result in the complete destruction of your species." The transfer began immediately. Human medical ships docked with the research station while Marines in powered armor secured every corridor. Captain Alex Rodriguez led the rescue teams deeper into the facility. Following scanners that detected human life signs, the first group of children they found was in what the Vorthak called the observation wing. 30 kids between the ages of 6 and 12 sat in sterile white rooms, their eyes empty and staring. They had been subjected to months of psychological testing, their minds probed and analyzed until many of them no longer responded to their own names. Sergeant Linda Davis found her daughter Sarah in room 47. The 8-year-old girl who had once laughed and played in the fields of Green Hills now sat motionless on a metal chair, staring at nothing. Machines around her recorded her brain activity while alien scientists took notes. "Sarah, baby, it's Mommy," Linda whispered, kneeling beside her daughter. "We've come to take you home." Sarah turned slowly, her eyes focusing with difficulty. "Mommy, are you real or are you another test?" Linda felt her heart break as she lifted her daughter into her arms. Around them, other parents and relatives were finding their own children, each reunion a mixture of joy and horror. The children were alive, but they were changed. Some couldn't speak. Others flinched away from human touch. All of them would need years of healing. In the deeper levels of the station, the rescue teams found the worst horrors. Dr. Patricia Stone, now serving as a military scientist, discovered laboratories where Vorthak researchers had conducted neural modification experiments. They had tried to map human creativity by cutting open children's skulls and placing monitoring devices directly on their brains. How many? She asked the Vorthak scientists they captured in the lab. 317 subjects underwent neural modification, the alien replied through its translator. "We were trying to understand how human brains process adaptive solutions. The research was vital for our empire's survival." Patricia looked at the creature with eyes that held no mercy. "Your empire's survival ended the moment you touched the first human child." The final count was devastating. Of the 50,000 children taken, only 15,000 survived. The others had died during experiments, succumbed to alien diseases, or been killed when their bodies rejected the modifications the Vorthak had attempted. Each name on the casualty list was another crime that would never be forgiven. President Burke received the reports in his bunker beneath Earth's surface. The man who had once promoted peace throughout the galaxy now ruled an empire built on the bones of his enemies. The children were coming home, but the price of their rescue had changed humanity forever. "Mr. President," said General Frank Miller, "what are your orders regarding the Vorthak homeworld?" "Our forces are in position to begin orbital bombardment." Burke looked at the tactical displays showing human ships surrounding the Vorthak home system. Below them, billions of aliens waited to learn their fate. The old Burke would have shown mercy. The new Burke had no mercy left to give. "Proceed with the occupation," he ordered. Every Vorthak world is now human territory. Any resistance will be met with immediate destruction. The conquest of the Vorthak Empire took less than a month. Their remaining fleets surrendered without fighting when they saw what human weapons could do. Entire star systems were claimed by human forces and renamed after the children who had died. The Vorthak homeworld became new humanity, its crystal cities replaced by human settlements built from the rubble, but the war's end didn't bring peace to the galaxy. The other alien species had watched humanity's transformation with growing terror. The gentle explorers they had known were gone, replaced by conquerors who ruled through fear and overwhelming force. The Galactic Council held its final session 6 months after the Vorthak surrender. Prime Counselor Veltar, speaking from his occupied homeworld, formally dissolved the organization that had governed interstellar relations for thousands of years. We can no longer pretend to govern a galaxy where one species possesses such military superiority, he announced. The age of cooperation is over. The age of human dominance has begun. In its place, President Burke established the Terran hegemony with himself as Supreme Chancellor. Species that had remained neutral during the war were offered protectorate status. Those that had supported the sanctions against humanity faced occupation and punishment. The proud Kethmar warrior race submitted after human ships demonstrated their orbital bombardment capabilities by turning their primary fleet to space dust in less than 10 minutes. Captain Lisa Martinez, now Admiral Martinez, commanded the hegemony guard that maintained order on conquered worlds. Her flagship, the patrolled former alien territories with the authority to destroy any world that showed signs of rebellion. The woman who had once studied ancient ruins now ruled over the ruins of alien civilizations on New Pittsburgh. Director Tony Mitchell watched his factories produce weapons for an empire that spanned half the galaxy. His grandson had been among the survivors, but the boy who came home was not the same child who had been taken. None of them were. They had seen horrors that would haunt them forever, and their trauma served as a constant reminder of why the old galaxy had to die. "Sir," his assistant reported, "we're receiving new orders from Earth. They want us to begin production of atmospheric processors. We're going to terraform 100 former alien worlds for human settlement." Tony nodded. The galaxy was being remade in humanity's image, one world at a time. Alien cultures that had existed for millions of years were being erased, replaced by human colonies and human values. It was the price the galaxy paid for threatening human children. Jacob Thompson, now Colonel Thompson, led the hegemony guard forces that maintained control over the former Vorthak territories. His sister Amy had survived the experiments, but she would never fully recover from what had been done to her. She lived in a special facility on Earth with the other damaged children, cared for by the best doctors humanity could provide. "Sir?" His aide reported, "We're receiving reports of unrest in the outer territories. Some species are talking about forming a resistance movement." Jacob looked out at the human city that had been built where the Vorthak capital once stood. Alien architecture had been torn down and replaced with human buildings. Alien monuments had been destroyed and replaced with memorials to the lost children. "Let them try," he said quietly. "They'll learn the same lesson the Vorthak learned. You don't threaten human children and expect to survive." The transformation was complete. Humanity had become the galaxy's dominant force, ruling not through diplomacy or trade, but through fear and overwhelming military power. The species that had once brought gifts and friendship to alien worlds now brought conquest and subjugation. On the observation deck of the USS Destiny, Admiral Carter looked out at the stars that now belonged to humanity. Her fleet patrolled space that had once been free to all species, now claimed by human force. She thought about the children who were slowly healing on Earth, and the thousands who would never come home. A new transmission appeared on her command screen. The Quantum Collective, a species from beyond the galactic rim, had made contact with human territory. Their message was brief and ominous. They had heard about humanity's expansion and were coming to investigate. Carter smiled coldly as she read the message. "Let them come," she said to her bridge crew. They can join the long list of species that learn not to underestimate human determination. The galaxy had wanted to study human nature. Now they lived under its rule. The age of human innocence was over. The age of human empire had begun. And any species that threatened what humanity protected would discover why 3,000 years of peace had ended in a single day, and why it would never return to the old ways again.